Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, getting the conversation started about menopause. This is a special release for World Menopause Day with Coxon and Tracey Tait. We talk about the misunderstanding of menopause, busting myths and talking symptoms, and a company that isn't open to discussing this will suffer more than the women going through it.
How are you looking after your people on World Menopause Day? Listen to our podcast with Coxon and Tracey Tait and find out why these two meno mavens have joined forces to create Menocourse, an online solution to managing menopause in the workplace. Menocourse has been created for CEOs, directors and managers at every level because while women are generally very good at managing their own self-care at home or away from work, the problems arise when there's little or no support for them at work. But as these two have discovered, it's not because leaders and managers don't care, it's because they don't know enough about it or what to do. And they're avoiding finding out because they believe they have to attend a conference or live workshop that's going to be uncomfortable, clinical, and quite frankly, icky. Menocourse removes the ick and replaces it with an easy-to-follow 5-step solution for forward-thinking leaders who want to get ahead of the game and show their people they matter. So we're in Inspiration North headquarters today on World Menopause Day, and we have two lovely ladies with us who are going to tell us all about menopause and their exciting new course that they are developing. So talk to us about, why are you here? Why are you drawn to this subject?
Well, the two that are here are Coxon and I'm Tracey Tait. And what we want to do is just let the world know that menopause isn't as crappy and daunting as everybody thinks. So what we would love to do is to help people who are in the workplace to get their heads around how they can help one human being to another. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do on World Menopause Day is just to start that conversation about it and just to talk about it's not that bad once you come out the other side. And Dee and I are working together to spread the word, get that conversation started, and it's starting off on your fabulous podcast today.
Cool, thank you very much for joining us.
Would you say it's I'm here as well, obviously. An open-minded chap, as you know, here to learn. Would you say this is a subject that's not really understood, talked about? What's the general feeling that I don't personally know a lot, so I'm looking forward to learning from you. What would you say?
Well, I think with menopause, one of the biggest problems we'll have with it is misunderstanding. People hear the word and they often run for the hills. And in my experience, I have a different experience to a lot of women in that because I was self-employed, and when I went through menopause, I was able to manage my circumstances and my work-life balance in a way that mattered to me, because something I didn't think about at the time, I was never in a situation in a corporate or public sector environment where I was contractually obliged to stay in an environment where, when I was, sort of bogged down with symptoms and having a real difficult time, I was obliged to stay there. So it wasn't until I did a midlife career change, and then I got out into the world and started meeting women who were in the corporate and public sector who had an entirely different experience to me, and that opened my eyes to how different it is for everyone, particularly in the workplace. And so given my experience and Tracey's experience, we've sort of banded together to make it easier for other people, A, to have an understanding, and B, once you have that understanding, to see what you can implement within the workplace, because there is so much information out there for women in terms of self-care, and women are inherently pretty good at looking after themselves and sourcing all of this information and implementing everything they learn. However, it's no good you having and knowing all of that if once you get to work, nothing's in place for you, or you're not allowed to roll with it because policies and procedures dictate otherwise.
Excellent. Do you want to tell us a little bit about bust some myths on menopause for us. So what was it like for you guys?
For me, when it started off, I didn't even know that I was actually starting to go through perimenopause, which is the first stage before you actually have menopause. And I think a lot of people think it's just the hot flushes. And for me, I didn't get the hot flushes until way, way down the line. And one thing we'd like to sort of say to people is that everybody experiences menopause in a completely different way. And for me, my menopause sort of started off with massive headaches, massive anxiety attacks, and then, just horrendous sort of period pain problems that just seem to go on for forever and a day. But when it comes to busting the myths about the menopause, it doesn't last forever. There are people that you can talk to that can help you get through it, and it doesn't define you as a woman forever either. And for a lot of women, it's actually quite freeing once you've actually gone through it and understood it. And if you've allowed yourself to have conversations with your friends, other women, and when you feel that you can actually have conversations with men, your partner, about it, and it's kind of like a bit of an unfurling for a lot of people, I think, as well. It's not something that is going to define you forever and a day. I don't know what Dee would feel about myth busting, but there's a lot out there.
My experience is entirely different to Tracey's, but there are lots of different symptoms that affect you in different ways. But for me, I was as mad as a box of monkeys for about 18 months. My competencies left me, my memory, really, really mad, which made me somewhat dangerous. And I also lost my nice filter, because anyone who knows me knows that I'm very diplomatic and very caring, and but I found it so easy when that veil just disappeared and I just said what I wanted to think, and it quite unkind at times, which was very out of character for me. But where it made me dangerous was, I would step out onto a road without looking left or right. I'd be walking around a car park, have no idea where the car was, or I'd put 150 quid's worth of shopping through the desk at Asda, and then be walking out with a bottle of flash bleach on my hip for £1.50, and it was only because a member of staff would give me that knowing look, knowing that I wasn't stealing, but actually you keep walking out that door with that in your hand and we're going to shout at you back. And so I just lost all my cognitive skills, and everything just went, and it was really frightening at times. My poor husband, who, good God, was my biggest supporter and literally went to hell and back. If you asked him the question about it, he would probably be good to be on the podcast, because he was absolutely brilliant. But even he, as good as he was and as understanding as he was, because it was so chaotic, he just didn't know what to do in the end, so we developed a shorthand language between us where I just raised an eyebrow and he knew not to ask a question, not to try and look for a fix, not to try and solve anything, because in that moment it was unsolvable. And I think when you know how difficult it can become to know that that exists, and in that moment the best thing you can do is sort of retreat and just not say anything for the moment, which of course in the next moment you'll be in trouble for not asking and not trying to help, because that's how erratic it is. From moment to moment it changes, especially if you're in the grip of what I call the madness or the fog. So I had entirely different experience to Tracey, except I would say that where the flushes were concerned, that was a real nightmare, because mine always took place between 6 and 8 a.m. So to be out the door for work, I would be showered, hair and makeup maybe 3 times before it all settled down. So it started to make me late for work. I couldn't manage to be there on time, and I was so exhausted from it. But I went on to flexible working hours to be able to manage that, because what I can say for me was, even though it absolutely wiped me out, and I couldn't put one foot in front of the other while it was going on, once it passed, I could function, I could do a good day's work. I was extremely productive and still had all of the skills that I normally had. So I didn't want to take full days off or have a week's sick, because I wasn't sick and I wasn't ill. I just, nothing was normal for maybe an hour or two each morning. And so flexible working hours did it for me. That may not be the answer for everyone. And I think the biggest understanding we should all have is, because there are so many symptoms and because it can be so different for everybody, what you might be aware of for one woman can be entirely different for another. And of course, then we have the women who sail through it, which is wonderful, you know, because not everyone has a tough time. And those who do sail through it can have a bit of difficulty, they'll sort of curl their lip up or raise their eyebrow, oh God, you know, because they haven't had the negative impacts. Some women can be quite unsympathetic when they haven't been through it, but I think the key message is it's different for everyone.
So to me then, it sounds like the first challenge is, if you've got lots of different symptoms, it sort of is recognising that fact, isn't it? But then it's whether you give it some kind of diagnosis. How do you get to a point where you can actually pinpoint it and say, now I understand the reason I've had headaches and any host of other symptoms? How do you get to that point where you realise, I can finally pinpoint it as being menopause?
Yeah.
That sounds challenging.
Yeah, for me, it was actually getting to the stage where I thought I need to find out what the hell's going on. Yep. I thought, is it early onset dementia? Am I going to experience a stroke? All these horrible things. So for me, it was actually going and speaking to a doctor. I had an experience with a doctor that wasn't the most helpful, but I found this really, really lovely doctor who put me through a whole load of like blood tests, and it's where you just get all your hormone levels checked out. And it came back that, I was heading towards perimenopause, the change, everything that was going to happen. And so that for me was like, oh, thank God. I'm not going bonkers. I'm not going nuts. This sort of everything that was happening to me, there is an answer. There is a reason for it. And that, for me was like a massive moment, massive, relief. But then I felt that I was left to go and work on it, find a solution by myself, because the doctors aren't geared up to help you really through it. And there was a GP that I spoke to who actually admitted that they didn't actually get any training around the menopause. So you're kind of left, and what do we all do when we think we've got something?
Google it.
We Google it. we go bonkers, and it freaked my brain so much, because again, it's like what Dee and I are saying, every single woman is different. Everything that happens to you is completely different. So I would look at the list of, things that you can have when you can be going through the menopause, and there's like a list of about 35. And I'm busy going, got that, don't have that. Or does that mean I'm going to get it? How's it, how's it all going to impact my life? But for me, it was the sad fact that you're left to go and find a solution that's going to help you personally with your symptoms. That was a big shock.
So I understand that there's lots of sort of medicine around it. So there's the clinical route. So what are the options you were offered from the medical side of things? For
me, what I was offered from one doctor when I had an episode where I couldn't leave the house for literally 3 months. At the time, I was working for myself, so similar to kind of Dee being self-employed. So having that little bit of, thank God I don't have to leave the house. So after the stage of like 3 months have gone, it's not improving, I need to see a doctor. Went to see a doctor, a different one who'd helped me previously, and her solution was a hysterectomy. Now at the time I was, late 40s, I had a young son, and a hysterectomy is a massive operation. And to me, that being a solution to what I knew was really kind of just the perimenopause and something that's completely natural and normal for women, shocked me. I think I cried for about 3 days, and to say to my husband, the solution to this and everything that's going on is a hysterectomy. And to think that that's what some women are being offered, to something that's actually quite natural and normal, and we can find ways to work around it, was immense. But then it was like, we'll get you tests first to see exactly what's going on. And it was actually a consultant that was my sort of saving grace, again reconfirming that it was the menopause that I was going through. Everything that's happening was perfectly normal, to talk about it, to get help, and that it will pass, and to take care of yourself, to recognise it. But then on top of that, once I knew that and was still doing more research, I actually spoke to someone who was a hormone mentor, as she described herself at the time, and her way of looking after yourself through the menopause was through diet and through health and through exercise. So for me, that was a route that I was prepared to take, and it did make a difference, because at one point, being self-employed, I was thinking, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to have to lose my business. But who's going to employ me? I can't leave the house 9 times out of 10, so I can't go and get a 9-to-5 job back in corporate land, which is my background. I have to make this work. So with a combination of a really understanding consultant, I didn't go through hysterectomy. I didn't do that at all. Looked at my diet, looked at exercise, journaled, looked inside myself on a regular basis, and just, worked through it with my husband and got the support. And that's, I've come out the other side, and there's smiles on my face. I've done it. I've lived to tell the tale. It's not the be all and end all.
No,
it's really not.
And what about you, Dee?
My experience was entirely different. I did go to the GPs eventually, but again, that was because I was convinced I was going mad. My behaviour at home was so uncharacteristic for me. And so at the end of I think we'd gone through about 7 months of this complete change in personality, and it was a huge change. And at the behest of my husband, who was exhausted with it, he said, we've got to look and see what's going on. And actually, because I was only 43 at the time, it never crossed my mind that that's what it would be. So when I went to the doctors, and again, they did blood tests, and she told me what it was, and I could have kissed her, because just knowing what was going on was better than having a prescription or anything for me. I didn't have any medication. I didn't opt for HRT, but having the understanding, and I have a confession to make here, because the real reason I went to the doctors was because I'd said to my husband, when I leave the room, you need not to follow me, because I think I'm about to stab you. That was how bad it was. And so we went and told the doctor this, because where it was from, I have no idea, because I've got a wonderful husband, and under normal circumstances, I don't want to kill him, contrary to belief. And so I went and told the doctor that I was really afraid, because I was having these thoughts. And she did the blood test, and when she brought the numbers up, she said, thank you for your confession, and I can't believe you haven't killed him, because these numbers are so out of kilter type of thing. And so for me, it was just having the understanding, and I literally came out of the doctors and all but skipped home, and just made the decision that, okay, it's down to self-care now. So because I was self-employed, I just took the time, for myself, to get into the gym, to swim and to walk. I walked for miles because I'd started talking to myself, which I enjoyed, so the longer I walked, the more I had these conversations with myself. And it was just about finding a balance for how it worked for me. As I say, I was mainly affected with physical symptoms on the morning, so I adjusted my work pattern to fit that. In truth, not everyone's going to love to hear this, but it took about 3 years for me before all of the symptoms subsided. The cloak of bad temper was the worst for me, and this just being angry all the time. I wasn't anxious or nervous or anything like that, just pretty much in a bad mood for 3 years, which must have been dreadful for the people around me. So it was all about self-care for me, and eventually the symptoms subsided, and they subsided gradually over time, until I'm back to my wonderful self. Some may argue, but that's true.
You're wonderful, Dee. I love you.
So do I. So does Jane.
Not being paid to say that.
The way I'm viewing it, the first challenge is recognise symptoms, pinpoint it as being menopause, and then you can take action to find a way that helps you to get through the period of time, whether it's a number of days, weeks, or even years. But then what you mentioned before, Dee, was how others can be affected, whether it's partners, family, colleagues. So if it's a challenge for a woman to actually diagnose herself or understand what's happening, how does that work then for other people that are around you?
Well, first of all, I want to give credit to the men here, because in all the research Tracey and I have been doing, and things that I've discovered myself, having gone through it and from speaking to other people, and I may be shouted down here by some women, I hope not, but I think the men often, not always, but often get a really bad rap over this, because in the first place, they don't have the same understanding as we do. When your wife, your partner, your significant other, your colleague or whatever is in the grip of it and having these bad symptoms, at 9:05 in the morning, you may want to sit down and share everything with them. By 9:10, you may just hate being in the same room as that person. So it's understandable that a man is reluctant to find out what's going on, because the response can be so different on any given day. And, to know that, well, I was speaking to her 5 minutes ago and she was fine. She's not very nice now. So that would put anybody off exploring it even more. And this is why I think, and this saddens me greatly, that the jokes go around the office and around the workplace about menopause, Brenda, open the window and give her a fan. Well, if somebody had offered me a fan, I probably would have wrapped it around their neck in the mood that I was in that moment. But for a man or even another colleague, if they're not experiencing it, and if you haven't had a conversation about it, and if there isn't the correct information in the workplace, then how do we expect a man or our other colleagues to know if the correct things aren't in place for them? And what I find is missing is the truthful element to this, because yes, there are booklets, yes, there are leaflets, yes, there's box standard information out there, but I think it would be really helpful to the men if they were aware of the reality of this situation, because it impacts them at home, it impacts them at work, whether it's their wife, their partner, a colleague. They're hit by this left, right and centre. And why would we expect them to know everything about it when menopause is, something that physically we are directly impacted by, but mentally they're impacted by because of our behaviour, because of symptoms. So I want to support the guys in understanding this, and I would like to think that they're not as afraid to have the conversations. It can be scary at times, but I think having an understanding would take them forward a lot further forward in managing the situation, either at home or at work, if they just had a bit of idea what was really going on.
Yeah, because you don't have to be an expert.
No.
Like any scenario, whether you are not even in a home environment, in a work environment, if you have an appreciation, as we're seeing the rise in the need of care to look after your employees and their mental health, I don't have to be a qualified clinical psychologist, GP, to say, okay, I've got an appreciation of menopause, of depression, of whatever it might be, but then my position is to say, how do I direct this person to the right sources of information, give them the right support, and help them get through this?
Make reasonable adjustments to their workplace.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I think as well that with the statistics now out there, I mean, the fact that there's nearly half of UK women are going to be in that menopausal common bracket, so over the age of 50. But I think for in the workplace as well, it's not assuming that because someone is over 45 and going on to become 50, that it happens to young women as well. And women as young as 30 can start to go through menopause. Menopause can be triggered because of medication, operations that they've had as well. And I think it's not always that older women, women of a certain age. I mean, I'll call myself a woman of a certain age, and I know some women hate that. For me, I am a woman of a certain age, and I wear that with pride. I've been blessed to get to this age. And so in the workplace and in a lot of environments, if you have a workforce that's predominantly female, to just kind of understand, you don't have to understand the medical things that are going on at all. You really don't. It's about, as James said, mental health. We don't need to understand the workings of the brain and the balances that change. You just need to be one human being helping another human being make a situation, better. And I hope, that's what Dee and I are, aiming to do, to get that conversation started about it. Put, realistic things in place to, to help people that are going through it all, and to see the light at the end of the tunnel as well. It's a big thing out there, I think, now. Definitely.
And I think it impacts employers more so now, because we have an ageing workforce.
Yep.
it's one of the things, you know, I've worked in sort of corporate where it's aging workforce. Oh no, all of the chartered engineers are retiring. And, you know, coming at it sort of from that perspective, all of this, you know, generational knowledge, etc. But I think we have found that women of a certain age who have experienced menopausal symptoms, you know, it gets to the point where you say, you know what, I'm just leaving because then my employer's not helping me. And almost the woman they don't necessarily know how to help themselves as well. So it's that kind of, what's wrong with you? I don't know. How can I help? Leave me alone or help me. It's that kind. It's really difficult for everybody. So HR people, managers, colleagues. You know, I've worked on teams where there have been women going through it, and it's kind of, you know, what we see is, you know, the cardigan coming off, the cardigan going on, them going outside. You know, we almost feel helpless, and it's almost kind of taboo to even talk about it.
Well, I can remember when I was still employed before I started working for myself full time. I was in an office environment, and there was a woman who was similar in age to me, and I could see her, you know, doing that kind of cardigan off, cardigan on, putting the desk fan on, looking a bit red, drinking cold water, and I was starting to feel a bit, you know, sort of hot, flushy as well, and uncomfortable. And I messaged her and I said, not just you, I think it's me too. And that sort of like relief that we could have that conversation in the workplace. But I think we sort of touched on it before, is whenever, you know, this colleague would say, can I get the windows open, it's really hot in here, people would be like, oh, and kind of like have a bit of a laugh about it. But I think what was nice was that her and I actually sort of joined forces, and I would, like, if she would say, oh, you know, we need to open the windows, it's a bit hot in here, but yeah, I'm boiling as well, and people are like, what? I'd be go, well, if it's not, you know, it's not just this colleague, it's me as well, it must be warm, so let's get this window open.
It's almost like thermostat wars.
Yeah, we've all been there in offices, haven't we? Yeah, so
just wear layers, everybody, just wear layers, you know.
I think it's important as well, though, for you know, for managers, CEOs, and leaders, for them to be aware of what's going on within the workforce, because what you've got to remember about these women, whatever stage they're at in the menopause, they're probably of an age where they're quite high level in terms of their career, so they still have this fabulous uniqueness. They still have all of these skills. They have all of these knowledge. They've brought wonderful things to the team already. They've brought wonderful things to the table already. Do you really want to lose these women, you know, from the workforce? And as Tracey said, because we have an ageing workforce, and that's not going to change anytime soon, do you want your talent pool to shrink at this rate just because, you know, there are some small things you could have in place, the first one being an understanding of what's going on, but to make some small changes in the workplace, you know, some of them even nuanced, and to have some things in place, some practical things in place, link that in with well-being at work, because otherwise, because for a woman, you know, especially if she's been ridiculed at work, or there isn't the support at work, you know, and she's so worn out, and she'll think, I'm just not going back, or that little bit of time off for sick leave leads into something longer, and it gets harder and harder to go back because the last time a colleague seen her, she was a quivering wreck or whatever. And even though she may have been all of those things and done all of those things, she still has all of that skill. She still has all of that knowledge. It's still all there to come to the table, and, you know, to be effective in the workplace that she's probably been massively effective in for 25 to 30 years. So are you really going to let that all go because you're a bit nervous about having a conversation to find out what's going on? I hope not.
It's almost to the point where it should become normalised that if you think of a pregnancy, I've worked with colleagues where, you know, baby brain, we always joke about that.
It's
where
a thing.
They're
It's
hot,
a thing. It is.
they're having flushes, but we just say, oh, they're going to have a baby. It's just normal.
Yeah.
So I could almost envision a future where it becomes a discussion about menopause is as common as just talking about pregnancy.
Yeah.
This person is going through a period in their life that requires some adjustments, and, you know, it's just part of what we do now.
I think people are unnecessarily scared, you know, and I was talking about the men earlier, but a lot of the women I've been speaking to lately, some of them, their managers are young women. You know, one lady said to me, My line manager, she's 35. She's absolutely gorgeous. I get on really well with her. However, when I go to our office and I'm in a state because I look like I've just got out the shower, I'm really distressed and my hair's wet and I look a mess, and she thinks it's hilarious and she just laughs. I mean, imagine what that must be like when that's the response. But again, I'm not having to go at the line manager here, because if she doesn't know and she doesn't understand, and my advice is hurry up and understand and hurry up and find out, because you'll be there yourself sooner or later. And wouldn't it be nice to have a leg up, not only to understand what's going to be coming your way, but how you can understand your workforce? Because having a laugh at someone who's in that state, it's not a good way to proceed, and it's not going to make people feel any better in the workplace.
And then it's that erosion of the psychological safety as well.
Yes.
It's that kind of, you are a human being. You might be going through something and that can be visibly hilarious to people. Yep. But, remember there's a human being behind that hot flush or, that need to leave a room or what. So what kind of, as a manager or as a colleague or as an actual human, what kind of practical steps can people put in place to support?
Well, we've talked about, sort of fans on desks, because women do feel like, really hot. But even just having that as a given, to someone, giving them access to cold water, without making any fuss, about, it's going to cost us money to, get cold water in the office. If, someone's in a meeting environment and they just feel that little bit uncomfortable, just allow them to go and to have 10 minutes to gather themselves, to get their thoughts back together without drawing attention to it, without, having that chuckle or, you're having a wee flush, you're having a wee moment, just to give them that time. Because as Dee rightly said, this person's still that same talented individual. Their symptoms don't define them as your talented member of the workforce. So, when they had the symptoms of the brain fog, their concentration's all over the place, they've not been sleeping very well, or they maybe got a little bit of emotional turmoil because they've maybe had an argument with their husband and it's through no fault of theirs, they've got all this kind of stuff, going on. It's just to give them that time. And even things, when people go to work wearing uniforms, one of the research, I think it was Nottingham Police Force, what they had done was made sure that they had showering facilities, but changes of uniforms available for women. So that if they felt uncomfortable through having, a flood moment or a hot flush, they could go and have a shower, and that they would maybe know in the toilets that there would be sanitary products available for them if they needed them, being, caught off guard with it or whatever. So it's, you provide uniforms for your staff. So it's just having extra uniforms, lying around. And again, businesses might go, this is going to cost us all a lot of money. Well, weigh it up, because to keep your staff retention, how much does it cost you to lose that person and then to rehire someone that's got that skills of that woman that's just left? It actually then becomes good business sense to get to grips with, what we're in the grips of. The vast majority of our population are going to be impacted, men and women. The menopause affects us, all at different levels, and you're going to be prepared for that. And for women, we're going to go through the menopause once. If you're in the business, you're going to have it second hand, time and time. If you're not ready for it, you're going to suffer the menopause more than us women. So the more you can learn.
And of course, you in the corporate world, as a manager, a CEO or whatever, do you want to be that company with a lousy reputation for not taking care of your staff? And as I say, it's not, Tracey talks about showers and various things. I would love to see them all with a meno pod, where the lady can just go off and strip off and have a relax till she pulls herself together. I know that's I know that's a big ask, you know what I mean, but that would be wonderful. But I'm not saying that every workplace has to implement that,
Menopod,
menopod, I love it. A menopod, that's what I would have. And I would have a Dyson fan on every desk. What's it called, Michelle?
It's
Dyson.
the hot and cold fan.
Yeah, whatever. It's under 400 quid, so it's affordable, but it doesn't make any noise, so it won't draw attention to you, and it purifies the air around your desk, and it keeps you nice and calm and everything. So if you're a really good boss, you would get that for your staff.
I want one now, because I'm always cold. So
I do
for now.
Yeah, why not?
So yes, it's you have a hot setting and a cold setting. So depending on what you want, it might stop some of the thermostat wars.
Yeah.
I've never worked in, actually, I'm just thinking about it, I've never actually worked in a building with windows. So it's always been air conditioning or heating.
Wow.
Oh, can you imagine how awful that must have been?
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Tracey mentioned earlier, if someone needs to leave a meeting or whatever because they're having a moment, and I would ask people to think about the other side of that. I've heard from women who, if maybe he's been in a meeting and it's been their moment, they've been bringing something to the table and they've done all of this work, and then at the worst possible moment, they're overtaken by symptoms. Now, I get it, and I understand that, everyone in the room begins to feel uncomfortable because they're waiting for this person to speak and to present or whatever. Not only is she not speaking, but she hasn't stood up yet, and she looks a little vacant, and she's, so they're all thinking, oh my God, what the hell's going on? But you put yourself in her shoes, and in that moment, there's a good chance that she can't hear. She can't speak. She's afraid to stand up because she feels the floor is going to just disappear from under her feet. So then the panic sets in, what's going to happen. So there's something big going on in the room, but everyone has a different perception of what that actually is, Now, to have someone in that room understand, maybe not literally the symptoms that have taken hold then, but to have an understanding of what's going on and to create a situation where that woman can be just allowed to escape for a few minutes, or let's go and have a comfort break, or let's go and have a coffee, and just free her from those terrifying symptoms, because she feels bad enough to begin with, and the fact that everybody's standing around going, well, I've been waiting 10 minutes for her to present, and she's still sat there, to have an understanding of what might be going on would go a long way to facilitate things that often break down when you don't want them to, or when you least expect them to.
Yeah. So I'm finding this really, really informative, really useful. Now, in the small world that we live in, I go out and make friends on LinkedIn. Michelle sends me out to make new friends and the like. Find new business, find new podcast guests. So I met Tracey on LinkedIn before today. So that's funny. That's a small coincidence. So how did you two meet?
Well, it's actually 7 years since we met on...
All right.
We originally met on Twitter.
Yes, you do, yes.
And we've came into each other's sphere, each other's circle, if you like, at a variety of networking events and different things. And we meet up for coffee as well, not every week, but every now and again. And when we do meet up, it's like we just pick up where we've left off. We have a very natural relationship that just flows. And we have entirely different businesses. We're both self-employed, and we don't work together in any way, shape or form. But because of this ongoing relationship that we've had, I recently, had the idea about creating Menocourse, but I didn't want to do it by myself. Mm-hmm. But what I'd noticed the last few times Tracey and I had met, most of the conversation and all of the pots of tea were taken up with menopause. So I had these massive conversations. We were able to understand where each other was, the journey that we were going through. And then, time moved on, and at these different networking events, I've been approached by different people who wanted to ask me questions about menopause, and writing my book, which was nothing about menopause, but it was about having a midlife career change. And then I was approached by a lady who all of her work is about menopause in the workplace. She asked me to do a piece for her. She identified me as a success story, somebody who had come out of the other side. And because of that, this is how I've come into contact fairly recently with lots of stuff going on about menopause, whether it's been someone that's been going through it, someone who's been impacted by it, or someone basically complaining about their workplace. So I thought it was really bothering me to the fact that I wanted to do something about it. And the men that I've spoken to, the managers that I've spoken to, taken on board in particular how they feel so uncomfortable about it, I thought, I've got to do something about this, but I don't want to do it on my own. There are some skills I'm lacking to be able to do this on my own. I know. I'm going to ask Tracey Tait if she'd like to do it with me.
And I said yes. And when we were having our conversations, because my background has been corporate land, I was in corporate land for a very, very long time before I became self-employed. And, my sort of journey through being the menopause and how it impacted me, considering whether or not to, give up my business and everything like that. But also, coming from a place where it was predominantly male orientated, and for a woman to just sort of be in that environment, and it just really connected with what Dee was saying, and I thought there's definitely a need for this, because if I was still in corporate land, if I was still trying to be a mum, a wife, someone who was a successful businesswoman or employed woman, how would I cope? How would I actually be able to do anything about this if I don't understand what the heck was going on in the early days when it was first kicking in for me? How would I then be able to have a conversation with a manager or even the HR department, because I worked for larger companies, for them to get their head around what the heck they can do to help me? So the idea of putting Menocourse together is to give anybody who has a team of people, small, large, male, female, and just wants to know what they need to know without the icky bits. I've spoken to men and women that they don't want to know the icky bits, and Dee'll say, she's been at events and she's maybe got a bit icky, and she's actually seen men who have told her that I had to leave at the first coffee break because it got too much. Dee and I put the Menocourse together without the icky bits. It's just sound practical advice for human beings, to help others in the workplace, get through this together.
And one of the main reasons that I wanted to do it in this way was because of the research we've done, because of the people I've come face to face with and the conversations I've had, particularly with managers, with line managers, with senior managers. And because they all seem to flag up the fact that they don't want to go to an uncomfortable conference. They don't want to be in a mixed workshop, male and female. It's not because they don't want to know about it. They don't know what's coming. They don't know what's going to be discussed. They're in a state of high anxiety because, God, what on earth are they going to say? And so I just had this vision in my head that wouldn't it be so much easier that instead of knowing everything, which you don't need to know to get through this, if there was an opportunity, for a person, male or female, whoever it need be, for them to just have a working knowledge, but just to be able to go online, just press a button and just work through it, self-paced, at their own pace. It's not a huge thing. It's absolutely time-saving. It can be absolutely private. Access it from your phone while you're in the gym, while you're in the car, from your laptop, whatever. But you're not in that environment where, as I say, the thing that's been flagged to us is I don't want to be in a conference. I don't want to be in a workshop. And I understand that some people have to because that's what their workplaces are putting in place. But what about if you're that person that doesn't have to wait for the workshop or doesn't have to wait for the conference and just has access to something that you click a button, you buy that, you click that button and say, I've got it, I understand it, I know what I'm doing now. So that will either be enough for you, or the other side is you can be absolutely prepared when your workplace call you in and tell you you're going into a workshop or there needs to be some conversation around it. You can say, I'm sorted, I've done Menocourse.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we normally finish our podcasts off with asking our guests to go back to the 18-year-old self and what advice they would give. But I think it might be fairly interesting to speak to you both about going back to your pre-menopausal self and what advice would you give those wonderful ladies to get through their peri-menopause and menopause?
I would say that it's perfectly normal what is happening to you. You're not some freak, you're not an outcast, you're not going absolutely bonkers. And what I wished I had known was, to be honest, what I wished had happened was that there was more conversations about it. Whether it's between, mothers, daughters, sisters, family, whatever that might be. But also as well the fact that if I had been, at work, we all work, been in an environment where it was completely normal, like James has touched on, sort of pregnancy, maternity leave, paternity leave, mental health now is, being encouraged to talk about more openly, then it would just be, this is a stage of life that I'm going through. It's perfectly normal. There's things out there that can help me, people out there that can help me. And it will be fine. I will come out the other end. I will still laugh. I will still smile. I will get me back. I will get my energy levels back. And It's absolutely fine. It's a normal process. It's nothing for anybody to feel that they shouldn't be able to say the word menopause. It doesn't have to be whispered or, you know, just sort of mouth the words, the change.
That always makes you think of, do you remember the classic Les Dawson
Yeah,
sketches?
exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, the two women
With the
behind
lady
the
who's
hand.
had a hysterical rectomy, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Which is fine, because that kind of makes the whole funny sort of point of it, or, you know, sort of talk about women's troubles or what's going on. It's downstairs. It's all downstairs. Yeah, and I just wish that had been the sort of situation when I was, you know, my pre-menopausal self, that it was all perfectly normal stage of a woman's life, regardless of what age it happens to her, that you can come out the other end.
And Dee?
I think the first thing I would say is, as a woman, we know our own body so well that as soon as you notice something different happening to you, in my case it was the madness. But I would say don't wait as long as I did before visiting the GP. But, you know, if you see some changes happening within yourself, make a note of it and go and get some help over it fairly quickly. That's about that side of it and the symptoms. But what I would say, and I hold my hands up to this, my younger self or my pre-menopausal self could be fairly judgmental of other women who are seen going through it, because I now know, because I didn't have an understanding of it. I didn't need to have an understanding of it because I was completely unaffected by it at that time. But had I known then what I know now, I wouldn't have been the woman that raised an eyebrow and sort of said, good grief, what's the matter with her, type of thing, because I would make sure that I had a better understanding of it. And that's what I want for everybody, to have an understanding of it earlier so they can manage it better for themselves, for their families, for their loved ones. So yeah, I would take more notice beforehand to make sure I could get a handle on it.
That's great. It's been really informative, our chat, so I feel a bit better prepared and know a bit more. So the next step really is the course, isn't it? I'll have to sign up for that.
Yep.
So what's the best way for people to find out about the Menocourse? What's the best way to find that?
Okay, so what we've done at the moment, if you go on to LinkedIn, and it's under a company page, it's not under any of our personal pages, and literally just type in Menocourse, that's MENO, followed by course, it's all one word. There'll be an opportunity there to register your interest, because we're currently putting the course together. We're about 50% the way through. We're going to be launching in November. It's a completely online program, so that, you know, there'll be no physical conferences or workshops or anything like that to attend. You'll be able to access everything online. So the reason we're giving people the opportunity now to register their interest is obviously because it's going to be ready to use in November. And even though we've put the modules together and covered everything that we think we need to cover, if you want to register your interest on our page, and if you have a question for us or something you would like to see in the course, and, you know, or send us a message and say, are you covering XYZ? Could you cover whatever? Then we would be absolutely open to this, because, you know, we'll launch it and it'll be a 5-module program that we've created, but it's going to be done in a way that we could add to it if that was needed. So go on to LinkedIn, type in Menocourse, register your interest, and we'll take it from there, because we'll be good to go in November.
Fabulous.
Well, that has been a really interesting chat. So thank you ever so much, both of you, for coming to Inspiration North headquarters. That's the first time I've actually called it that, but there we go. I think that's going to stick. No, but then on other days we'll call it Insights Business Psychology headquarters, so otherwise known as my attic. So thank you ever so much for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode, when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.